Yes,
because you always use your own
creativity.
reference. You use your own reference.
Maybe some would.
When
yes.
you say creativity, what do you mean?
Yeah. Creativity in trying different methodologies for different topics, because in the West, most of the methodologies are coming out in religious studies, in literary studies. Ideas like canonization, like postmodernism, like structuralism. All of these are things that grew and that started from the West. Then we acquired them in the East. But because of the creativity in the starting points, there is always a possibility that other fields would be affected by this start. And therefore, there's always a tendency to be creative in approaching a topic. In general, in Arabic scholarship, there are more set rules. It's the material that you get is most of the time predictable. There are patterns which we know. In scholarship, there's the joy of discovery because you don't know what's going to come out. And I think what we have always called for a collaboration of both, because both have something to give and enrich the other. And Islamic civilization, I mean, the whole point about Islamic civilization is that it worked with many cultures and many languages. So it's, in a way, I'm applying what I can see, what medieval Islamic civilization did. So there are points of strength and weakness in both places.
You mentioned in some of your writing that you like to look at history and civilization in blocks, in phases, and how relevant that block. It doesn't have to be linear, as you know.
Can't be. I mean, there are aspects of civilization that are linear, others that are not. So it's a question of admission that civilization are very complex creatures, and that we can simplify them. We can look at them as stretches only when we want to compare various civilizations with each other. Then we have to do that because we have to see patterns and compare. But if you're doing one civilization, you have to go into some depth, and you have to understand the geography, you have to understand the politics, you have to understand the historical progression and the historical moments, the people who made it, people who didn't make it, social response to ideas, social discarding of other ideas, groups and how they work together, how they work against each other, and so on and so forth. So all of this is so complex that studying civilizations as simple, phases, maybe. I mean, for teaching purposes, when we're teaching Islamic civilization, we have to create something that is a little bit simplified. In other words, like 16th century onwards, you call it the Gunpowder Empire or something like that until World War.
So you have to put lemon
so
on the border and frames, and so you can just
what they call it, a certain period.
But they probably they are not blocks. They just
And also, don't forget that these are movements. So there's always something going forward more than something else. Something else is receding. So you cannot say that there is 1 year in which something
one
like
period.
But still, in order to study it, you have to. So
relevance.
1258 is the time when Hulagu conquered Baghdad. This is a major date. You have to know it. And by the way, in my opinion, if you don't have memory for dates, to know when something happened, you can't study civilization.
Well, I'm out
At
of
least
it. That's why I'm
my
here.
opinion.
I just talk.
My students know this, and I tend to be notorious for asking students to learn the death dates of people.
So what does that do your analysis when you know the dates?
You know the structure, you know the flow, who
the
came
frames.
before what. And it's a frame of reference. And if you don't know that so-and-so lived after so-and-so, then
you lost.
That's a big problem.
But, so is there such thing as good civilization, bad civilization?
No.
So
it's a question of how much the civilization offered to humanity when it was able to be productive. And it's only when a civilization is unable to be productive that we can speak about an end of civilization. You can talk about the Greeks, for example, or the Romans. Same for Islamic civilization. And there are people who get upset if you tell them, you know, Islamic civilization is a phase. And they would say, oh, it's continuing until today. Of course, Islam is continuing. Yes, of course. And there are Muslims that are continuing. But how much are the Muslims producing, contributing, and changing? You know, how much are we influencing medicine or astronomy or even simple things like cooking or, you know.
We don't even have the hummus. It's been taken away from us.
Well, we should reclaim it. I mean, it's ours. Don't ask the
Israeli
Lebanese about hummus. We are... You know, the Lebanese hummus is the best in the world.
Of course, Lebanese hummus. Go to Emily last night, and hasn't it changed in the last 50 years, that place?
Has it not? Yeah.
Same thing, same menu.
Well, you've been here longer than I have.
But, you know, when people talk about Islam, they talk about Islam like in the last 200 years, maybe after. In America, maybe after 9/11.
Yes, that's
true.
So
tell us those blocks in Islam and how they contribute to the history and.
Well, this is not my field, mind you. My field is much earlier than that.
I'm talking about the old Islam.
Oh,
you know, you were interested. You started with. Your interest was at the Shia's movement.
I did my PhD on my PhD dissertation on a sect which came to be called the Kaysaniya, which is a sect that does not exist now. It lived only for about probably a century and a half, and then it died out. However, it was so influential in the first Islamic century, which would be the 7th, and also into the 2nd, which would be the 8th. So 7th into the 8th century, but mainly in the 7th century, they were so influential that we can think of them as the nuclear group from which other Shiite sects started. So that was what I worked on, and I had great interest in Shiism. I still have a great interest in Shiism, and because I think it's such a central part of Islam that it is wrong, I think, to talk about it as a sect because it's just another group. No, the Sunnis obviously are tremendously majoritarian, but the Shiites have developed certain ideas that are worth pursuing, and they influence the flow of civilization. Of course, there's lots of Shiites who were part of that, of the construction of that civilization, just like everybody else, like Christians, like Jews, like Sunnis, of course, and you know,
so what's
Arab,
so special
Persians,
about
whatever.
That group, the Kaysaniya?
This group started.
How's it different than the rest of them?
Interesting. They started with an extremist tone, in the sense that they tried to think that Ali, who is the cousin of the Prophet, and of course is a huge figure in Shiism, is endowed with special features, special knowledge, and you know, and therefore his descendants. And in the Kaysaniya, it doesn't matter if they're the children of Fatima or not. So it's a little bit broader than what Shiism later became. His descendants were endowed with special powers, and they were the first group, the Kaysaniya, to develop the idea of the Mahdi.
I know we have half a minute to believe it or not.
Oh, I know we're going to have this is very little, so
we're going to have it again. Yes.
So the idea of the Mahdi, or the Savior, the one who comes at the end of time, who brings justice to the earth, and as much as it had been.
But this is not original idea. This is like Christian.
Well, no, it's of course it's found in the Near East. Obviously, one of my students actually is working on developing this idea further, but it's been studied a lot. That's how things started with me. Then I developed into doing more things like in Arabic prose and the relation between the production of aesthetic literature and intellectual literature, particularly in theology.
I think that needs another show to give the time, but I really appreciate coming here. This is amazing. We need to hear more of that on the mainstream media. Thank you so much. This is Professor Wadad Kadi, and we'll see you next week. Happy Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you all. Bye.